Team Talk. I'm joined by Elise Williams today, Director of Impact at the Mindset Development Group. Welcome, Elise.
Thank you very much, James. Great to be here.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to get into um, the whole subject of mental well-being. Is that right, Elise?
It is, yeah, maybe busting some myths and providing some kind of tangible next steps and tools that people can take away for themselves and their teams.
Excellent. One of the things you said when we last spoke was a lot of the stuff in this area is kind of resources, and they become a bit of a tick box exercise, and that can be very reactive, and it can have very little impact. And what
Mm,
really resounded was the fact that that doesn't really address the majority of teams' needs.
mm.
Um, so we're going to be really asking, are people doing enough in this space? I think you've got some tips to help step people through the minefield, and even some research that you've done on this subject.
Yeah, that's right. And I think if you kind of backtrack as to the importance of mental wellness and employee support has increased dramatically over the past few years. And I think with the pandemic and the challenges that were brought due to that, it brought mental wellness to the forefront of individuals, but also in organizations' minds. So there was a really big surge in the recognition for the need
Right?
for wellness resources, and coming out of the back of that, the industry has really increased in the number of organizations providing provisions around employee support, particularly mental health and mental well-being. And where we've set out, I guess my role over the past 9 months has been to analyze and research with HR leaders and small business owners around, what are the key workplace challenges that people are experiencing? What are the go-to traditional solutions that are in place, and what impact are they having, with the view to get some real tangible data, anecdotally, that we can then use to start to build some really robust evidence-based approaches in place that directly tackle the key workplace challenges that people are experiencing.
Delighted that somebody's doing that research and understanding the key challenge. What would you have found? What are like the sort of the top three or so challenges that came out of that research?
Yeah, good question. I think I went out and interviewed different, people from different industries, different business sizes, different sectors, to try and get a real, broad range of conversations going. But
Excellent.
what was interesting is that the key challenges really remain the same. A big one being around coping with change. You think, had the workplace evolution that's happened over the past few years, coping with the changes in the way that we work, whether that's being in the office, being at home, whether that's the use of technology within your role, and also the wider uncertainty, the economic uncertainty on particular sectors and industries, and how that plays a part in your everyday productivity and effectiveness. But the key challenges were around that coping with change, absenteeism, sickness, and also supporting people to cope with the inevitable setbacks and failure that they are going to face in their jobs and wider life.
Tell us more about coping with change, because we've over the past few years, and I'm sure this has influenced. We've gone through quite a few major changes that
Mhm.
I guess not managers and leaders are equipped for. Sometimes all teams will go through change, but often people there's a well trodden path. What do you find that was different?
So different in the aspect of how people cope with change.
Different in terms of what people need right now in terms of the changes they're facing.
That's a really good question. I think it's a really tough one to ask because it's so individual, isn't it? Like how,
Indeed.
but providing the support to cope with change in terms of open communication channels, but also having the tools in place already to support you to navigate through whatever curveballs come flying our way. You think, one of the only things we can ever guarantee is that things aren't always going to go our way. Things will go wrong and things will come from left field. So without knowing what that is specifically, what is that change going to look like? What is that change in itself? It's how can we best support us to proactively build a mental strength foundation that we can apply to whatever challenge comes our way. And this is where we really found out of that research that there's a big gap. The recognition is around the workplace is more challenging maybe now than it ever has been, due to the variety of reasons that we were just chatting about. The traditional go-to support tends to be like you mentioned, it's very reactive. Things like employee assistance programs or mental health first aiders, they tend to be the go-tos, and whilst they are of course essential for anyone that is experiencing crisis or who needs urgent support for a particular challenge they're facing, whether that's at work or wider life, those resources are in place to signpost them to find a helpful next step in the moment of a challenge. There's been recent research looking at the efficacy of those employee assistance programs in the support that they're providing, which shows that actually they're not providing enough support or at a speed for people that are in crisis mode. So that's kind of separate. They're not as effective as they could be for people that are in crisis mode. But I think the key point here is that where they definitely don't support people is the majority of team members and the workforce that aren't in crisis mode, but also aren't living and unlocking and working to their potential due to mindset challenges that we might experience, whether that's coping with setbacks, whether that is focusing without distraction, whether it is confidence, limiting beliefs getting in the way of us stepping out of our comfort zone. And so that proactive approach, where actually we're not in crisis mode, but a recognition of no matter our start point, we can be developing really helpful habits and tools into our everyday that are going to support us to better cope with these inevitable challenges, the coping with change that we can't necessarily identify what they are or when they're going to happen, but we can control, is ensuring that we give ourselves the best chance of thriving and coping through those setbacks and failures when they do come. So a really proactive and preventative approach to not only mental fitness, but also wider productivity, effectiveness, engagement in our work roles, and resilience.
Really interesting. The way you describe it, to me, it sounds like you're almost training the brain to cope with some of these things rather than dealing with things after they've happened.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that. And I always compare this to, well, two things, right? Is that, traditional support that is reactive, where it's like waiting for your car to break down to then service it, which, we just never would do. But the other side of it is actually, can we treat our own brain and mind? I think no matter what path we are on in life, our age, our background, our role, our brain and our mind are our greatest tool to enable us to thrive. Yet, and this is what always strikes me, is that throughout our 14 odd years of education, we are never taught how our brain works, how to look after it, but also how to optimize it so that we are able to give our best to whatever comes our way. And most of us recognize, in order to keep physically fit, we need to exercise regularly. We don't wait until we're injured to start, and if we stop, we know our physical fitness level will decline. So if our brain and mind is our greatest life tool, why don't we treat it with the same proactive and preventative approach that we do our physical fitness?
That's a really, really good question. What
Why don't we?
why do you think we don't?
Well, I think the recognition is changing now, and I think there is a big shift in people recognizing that actually the need is there, and it's what they should be doing. But the gap, I think, remains, is that people maybe don't know what to do or how to implement these tools into their daily life to have tangible impact. And it's interesting, we were talking this week on one of our workshops about, there's so many resources out there, and what I was hearing from small business leaders and HR people, that there is actually a big fatigue. There's a big well-being fatigue, because there's a huge saturation of resources. Things telling you
That's so ironic, isn't it? Well, being
it's
fatigued.
but it's what we're hearing. There's a huge fatigue around, another well-being resource, whether that's a bank of videos to go and watch or articles to go and read. And what they lack, what we found out, is that it lacks the how. So you might be told what to do, but not how to do it, and how to do it consistently over time that has the long-term meaningful change. And this is where I've been trying to focus on, really, is pulling this, the outcomes of the research is that the critical factor determining whether a proactive and preventative approach, or anything, this could be applied to anything you learn, has impact, is what you do with it once you've learned it.
Absolutely.
And it sounds so obvious, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it's what you do with what you have learned. And this is where, actually, can we build and support people with accountability, with guidance, with ongoing support, to help them make the changes to their own daily routines, to their own, how they're operating their work and their life balance, that enables them to become more productive, effective, resilient over time.
Absolutely. And I guess that's quite a good challenge for us, isn't it? In terms of what you mentioned about all the other resources not necessarily signposting what to do. It's quite interesting. Let's look at kind of managers and leaders who would consider themselves to be proactive, who would consider themselves to genuinely want to get the best with and for their teams, not just for the business. Um, where do they start with all this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it is, like you said, it is a minefield. And of course, like, it's with best intention, isn't it, to support our teams and the individuals that we're working with. And what I would kind of almost suggest is to look at that, how, rather than it being purely reactive, is actually taking that step back and going, what are the challenges my team experience, and what are the proactive and preventative things that we can look at very tangibly, and how we're working, how we're operating, and how we're supporting, that allow, like, an open communication line, and a common language for people to start talking about, maybe what the challenges they're experiencing, and then also some really tangible tools to implement it day to day.
Yeah, because there's different personalities. People, they communicate in very different ways. Some people don't like to be so open
Mm.
in that regard. Was there anything that came out of the research or the work that you've done that uh, enables people to start talking and sharing in a more open way?
Mm. Yeah, there's a big shift in how people are, whether people feel comfortable to talk about, their mental fitness, but also looking at it kind of from a wider perspective, their productivity, effectiveness. And one thing that we've introduced that's been really effective is, we run it's called the Plan Do Review on a Friday morning.
Okay.
This might be something tangible that people can kind of take away and consider. And it is a weekly review, where you start off by asking a series of questions around the week just gone, noting what went well, what didn't go so well, in a really objective way, but also encouraging people to kind of share their wins and share their progress that they've been making. And then the rest of that half an hour is then spent on actually looking ahead to the next week, the week after, and effectively carving out time for the key activities that drive success in our role. And what that half an hour does is, it's classic, important, but it's not urgent. So there's no time frame or necessarily
Yep.
deadline. There's no one saying, oh, you have to do this. But carving out that time for that weekly review starts to build a self-awareness of our own thinking mind, but also a self-awareness of our own time allocation, which over time allows people to really make some, marginal gain improvements to the way that they're operating, the way that they are feeling, but also noticing the good stuff that we might usually ignore or brush over. So actually taking those few minutes in that weekly review to note down what has gone well for me this week starts
Very
to
important. Yeah,
rebalance that perspective, in that it's so easy to get caught up in this. I call it a vortex of despair, where we can get caught in really unhelpful negative thinking that oftentimes isn't truth based. It's our mind
absolutely. Yeah,
exaggerating situations and truth. And so by taking that couple of minutes to actively note down what's gone well, it's rebalancing that perspective of our lives, in that things externally in our external environment aren't necessarily changing. It's just our perspective of them are. And by carving out that that half an hour each week for that weekly review, it starts to encourage us to become more self-aware of those thoughts, but also in a community space like we offer it is just a drop in for all of our members can come onto that. And there's a real recognition that we're not alone. We're all humans in doing our best with the circumstances that are thrown our way, and that community aspect enables people to feel more connected, and then creating an environment that they may feel more open to sharing things that maybe they're struggling with, but also sharing guidance to the rest of their team and community around things that they've tried that's working well for them. So a long answer to your question, but hopefully that
yeah.
provides a
And it's
context
interesting.
for it.
Some leaders are naturally good at supporting their teams in this kind of thing. Speaking candidly, others it doesn't necessarily come naturally to them. What advice would you give to somebody where it doesn't come naturally? So the
Mm,
review that you've talked about comes across in the way it's intended, um, rather than not.
mm. It's a really good question. And that's the difference that you kind of explained there around the intent that we have versus the impact it has, and that empathy, isn't it? And how can we encourage leaders to, I guess, best support their teams when maybe they don't know themselves what resources could help them. And it is a hard one to navigate, and it is going to be very individual. But it's approaching it with a growth mindset, of that spirit of, actually, it doesn't matter that I don't have all the answers. It doesn't matter, but can we create an environment that supports the people that we're working with to be able to, and maybe that weekly review is somewhere to start. Even just encouraging that open discussion in a weekly meeting. But it's interesting where we've seen a real difference is if a team go through our, for example, a team go through our program without their managers versus a team go through our program with their managers.
Okay, yeah,
There's a massive difference in the longevity and the impact of what they've learned when their managers also go through it with
can
them.
imagine. Yeah,
That again may sound really obvious to say, but I think it's an encouragement to actually get involved with whatever support you're providing your team, to get involved with that on the same page as them. Because as you're going through it, what you're learning is like I think I referenced it earlier on around that common language. So giving you terminology that enables conversations to maybe open that maybe wouldn't do before, and providing that platform as an open space to really get involved with the team on that. It's taking the hierarchy out of it, and just like a shared group, a shared space of people, rather than managers and the
yeah,
different
because
levels.
we're all equal as humans, aren't we? Whatever roles or levels we might have in a business, we're all people.
Yeah, and I think seeing that human connection it's really empowering. I think just knowing that we're not always going to get things right, but with our best endeavors, can we give our best to the circumstances that we're faced with? And if leaders are able to show that vulnerability side of it, then perhaps that that can help open up conversations that
And
maybe
the meeting, thank you for sharing that. The meeting you've just described, how would you sum up the purpose of that weekly session?
Ooh, yeah, good question. So how do you sum up the plan do review? So it's a space for reflection that you may otherwise not have. So it enables you to, like I said, note down the good stuff, the wins, but also regain control of our time. So in a very we all work in very busy environments, don't we? And very reactive natures of our work where urgency can take over. What this provides is actually the PDR. If I was to sum it up in a sentence, it would be actively time for reflection, learning about those reflections and applying them next week for marginal gains. So that constant reflection for improvement.
And look, sometimes I play devil's advocate in this because it's not because I don't think that's a fab idea myself, but there'll be some people that are not necessarily cynical, but there's a massive difference between listening to you now, agreeing, thinking that's a great idea, and then when Friday comes and you're going to do your plan, do review, then default busyness will take over and think, oh, I'll just get this done, I'll skip that. So
Yeah.
how do you? And I guess not. This isn't just related. This could be. This is wider than, of course, this what this is a plan do review. Um, but how do you counter that? That's a key part of the the shift, isn't it?
It is. And it's carving out the time for it. And I mentioned before, something like this is important, but it isn't urgent. And so that's the challenge that we have is can we regain control of our time so that we're operating in a more proactive way rather than constantly being on the reactive. We've probably all got lists of things that in essence are important and urgent, but there's also a lot of urgency for tasks that maybe fly in that aren't necessarily important to our own key success activities, so the activities that drive success for us in our role. So it's a decision to carve out this time. And how can we support people to do that? I would say that the most critical part is accountability to begin with. So providing, whether that's an open call, a meeting space to do it, it's providing accountability, particularly in the first few weeks where we'll still be working in very much, reactive mode. It's can we, over time, carve that into a non-negotiable habit that we'll reap the benefits of long term, because there's that bit of delayed gratification in this, in that we are so drawn to quick wins, aren't we? The
Yeah.
quick instant rewards of maybe emptying our email inbox or whatever it might be that might distract us from the longer term projects or longer term rewards that are felt down the line. And the plan do review arguably is one of them, in that in the moment, on say it's Friday morning, you don't decide to do it. Well, in the moment, we're probably not feeling a big consequence of that. But the consequence or impact of choosing not to do it is felt down the line, when next week we're still on that hamster wheel of feeling very reactive, feeling very stressed. And in turn, maybe that then impacting on our own productivity, also our contentment, and our life balance in wider life. So it's can we bring the impact and consequence of deciding not to do, whether it's this plan do review or other
Yeah.
tasks that are important and not urgent? Can you just remind yourself of why is that important to you? What is the purpose or the why attached to allocating your time to it, so that longer term reward, but also what is the consequence of me not doing it now? And that can be really powerful as a helpful decision maker in the moment when you get to your Friday morning and go, oh, my plan do review, that's scheduled for now, but it's that decision whether to do it or not, and bringing that consequence
And I
in
think
connection
when
to.
you were describing it, it just reminded me. It's just stopping to think for a second on one level, isn't it? Um, and I think it almost, because we are humans and we're designed to take shortcuts, otherwise our brains will probably blow up. Then for me, it's almost a forced moment, which could be half an hour, could be 1 minute if you need it to be a minute potentially, that gets you to think differently. So I guess
Mm,
part of that thinking differently, connected to what we're talking about, is perhaps when you're looking at what you need to do differently, for example, maybe it's some of the enablers of that. So
Mm,
whatever that might be, if I get actually a right amount of sleep, I breeze through this kind of work, or some of those other factors. Do you encourage people to think more holistically along those lines? Because I inserted sleep there, but
yeah.
could have put any other kind of mental enablers in there.
Mm. Yeah, there's a big debate on LinkedIn. I think it was last week, but they were asking for contributors onto the topic of work-life balance. And I guess my stance on it is that actually what we bring to our work, we bring to all of our life roles.
Yep.
So maybe it's not so much about work and life, it's actually life balance. And work is
Yes.
one of those roles we play, but we play so many others, don't we? And arguably our own self-development is a big role in our life, alongside whether it's a parent, a spouse, a hobbyist, and our own fitness and wellness. So absolutely, I think it's looking at us as a person, and what we bring to our different life roles, and to your point, the impact, the enablers, I think you called them, like the different aspects of our life that impact our ability to turn up well rested, um our nutrition, our fitness, our how we manage our stress. All of those are different factors, and can we look to make marginal gains? There's often a very big focus on one big groundbreaking change or an earth-shattering decision that helps us, but
Yep.
actually it really is the power in our small daily choices and our efforts that combine over time to have big impact. And whether that's big impact on our own mental fitness, or whatever else it is, it's what are the tiny, really manageable, realistic, incremental changes that I can make day to day, week to week, that over time will support me in my endeavor to whatever the goal or objective is for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And how do you get started? If you're, you know, some of it might be down to the manager, some of it might be down to you personally as an individual. It's a bit like when you turn up to work. You can choose how much beyond some certain standards that are laid down. You can choose how much you really bring, can't you, to
Mm-hmm.
to your job? Um, so what about your own mental health? How do you get started on that journey?
And I think this will be individual to each of us. And like you said, it's there is a responsibility on our employer, the people that we work with, to provide sufficient and robust resources to support employees, particularly with mental health. But I think where I would slightly make a difference is between mental health conditions or diagnosable challenges or problems, and actually everything outside of that, which is what I would term mental fitness, around our ability to cope with challenges, and our ability to build that mental strength foundation. And that's, I think, the line of where we can support ourselves proactive and preventatively. And ultimately we can take responsibility for that. That's something that's
Yeah,
in our zone of control, our own, how we best look after ourselves, as well as there being a responsibility for our employer to look after us. It's also on us and what we can do. And again, those, if it it may be helpful, the kind of breakdown of looking at, again, marginal gains, those tiny actions that we can make in our day to day that have big impact. And what we've developed is a mental fitness workout, which is looking at 5 really small evidence-based tools. And the key with everything here is evidence-based, so ensuring that whatever resources you look to are backed by the latest neuroscience and psychology research, so that you can be sure that the efforts you're putting in are aligned to having the best likelihood
good
of
advice.
um and so five key tools that you could look to build in is, and this is the mental fitness workout, is a breath work exercise. And that could be just a couple of minutes in between meetings, in between tasks, as a chance to reset, and pause. And there was a study done by Microsoft a couple of years ago now, actually, that looked at the impact that these short breaks have. And again, going back to the way that the way that we work have changed so much. You think so much of our time is now in front of a screen, isn't it? And they had a group of people that had back-to-back meetings online.
Yeah.
The other group had meetings, but in between those meetings, they had a short break where they did a short breathwork exercise. And what they did was monitor the electrical activity in the brain, and they found a significant reduction in the stress buildup in the brain when people take those short breaks. So they may feel, insignificant at the time, just a couple of minutes. But what the science is showing us is that it really reduces the cumulative buildup of stress over time on our brain. So that would be one thing to start including. And again, a couple of minutes, if that's all that is available, is going to have an impact. The second tool, I call it daily thanks, and it's taking a moment to actually appreciate what we might usually ignore. And I know I mentioned that earlier on about just taking time to actively seek in what has gone well. It's almost, a really active and intentional gratitude practice. The third one is affirmations. And if you're anything like me, you may come to affirmations with a bit of a skeptical mind.
Many people do, yeah.
Yeah, they can be very overused and misused, but the key to them, you see people sharing quotes online with different statements and affirmation quotes that you may have seen, and then that may have caused the skepticism because you think, well, what good is that going to do to me? And the critical first step to ensuring that affirmations can support us, so a short empowering statement that supports us to overcome a limiting belief that we may experience a lot in our mind, or to support us to build a strength or a quality that we're working on building. And the key has to be that it is meaningful to you. The meaningful bit is often overlooked. So making it as personal and as relevant to your own circumstances as possible. Once you've crafted that short statement, it's then the second step is repetition. So if we think about, the way that our brain works is that the repetition builds helpful neural pathways in our brain. So if we are repeating a statement that is relevant to us, it is meaningful, and we repeat it, we're signaling to our brain that this here is important. And what practically is an example of this is one of our members shared this with me last week, is that they had a really big presentation to do. And the way that this has helped them proactively is that we all feel nervous, don't we? Before going onto stage to do a talk presentation, the nerves are kind of spinning, and we may have some unhelpful thoughts that are maybe doubting our ability, thinking, oh God, what if we dry up? What if we forget? What if people laugh at us? Whatever it might be that we can get unhelpfully caught in. But what he shared is that actually the 2 minutes that they spent side of stage before they went on, where previously they would be thinking those thoughts, it was a case of that breathwork exercise and an affirmation practice. So I'm a confident, well-rehearsed presenter. Repeating that over, they were able to go on stage in a much more effective way because they've got that confidence built in, and they're stepping onto stage with that that affirmation front of mind, rather than time where they're spinning in unhelpful beliefs.
And of course, you have to believe it, right?
You have to believe it. Yeah. Otherwise, it's no good. Otherwise, it really is no good. So it's creating something that is, meaningful to you is the critical part.
Yeah, something that helps people is the word, sort of action towards word within their affirmation. It's like I am becoming, or working on it, because it enables you to actually believe it now. If you just go, I'm the best presenter in the world, then nobody's going to believe that. Well, not for me, anyway.
No, it's a really important point, and it's a nice way of including that, knowing that we're all a work in progress, isn't it? That
Absolutely.
we're not at our best.
Let's face it, you are really open about it. People buy into affirmations at different levels. One of the ways I sometimes look at it, going back to your example of just about to go on stage or something, is if you're not managing the conversation, then your subconscious will. So you don't have to go kind of full on, this is my opinion on an affirmations, if it's not right for you. But if you start managing the conversation, then you're in charge.
Mm, yeah. And that's it. It's putting you in control of a process that gives success, whatever success looks like to you in that particular circumstance, the best chance of happening based on the work you're putting in. And actually, if you've done that work proactively, it's then when you come to side of stage, it's executing on the practice you've done and you know well,
Yeah.
and then forgetting about the rest and going on to stage and delivering, whatever talk it is.
Affirmation. That was number 3. Yeah.
Number 3. So number 4, and this is one that's actually taken from Stoic philosophy. It's crafting and thinking about what are the core values, the core maybe 3 to 4 key qualities that you believe make you a good person and that you want to live to and be remembered for. Once you have got those, whether it's kindness, calm, honest, growth mindset. Once you've got them, it's then having a short reflection at the end of the day and thinking, how closely have I lived to this value today? Give yourself a measure of 1 to 5 and then explain why. And that explanation, it's almost an evidence bank. If you've had a great day, you've scored yourself 4 or 5, then it's an evidence bank showing that what your actions are aligning to your core values, and what could be
Nice.
more motivating and confident, as a confidence boost. And what it also provides is, if, like we all do, we all have off days where a challenge may have arisen and we may not have reacted or responded in a way that we would have liked to. This values reflection offers us a really objective way of looking at, okay, this was actually really tough. What might I do differently if I face a similar situation? So instead of getting caught up in, again, like unhelpful self-limiting
Yeah.
beliefs, or our own inner critic just berating us for the mistake we made, just objective, what have I learned, what could I do next time?
Nice.
That's the values reflection. And then the final one is the one I hear most feedback on, around what we were talking about there, around life balance, as it were. And it's a daily reflection. And it's as simple as, at the end of the day, or first thing in the morning, about yesterday, asking 3 questions. Tell me about the day, whatever comes to mind, getting it brain out loud on paper, whatever
Yeah.
comes to mind, having a brain dump. What progress was made today and what can I learn from the day? And the way that this is, as like some implementation, maybe considerations for anyone that thinks this could help them, if they're getting home and feeling like they're unable to mentally switch off from work, if you're feeling like you're not fully present with your friends and family because maybe you're thinking about something that's happened at work, or you're working different hours, it can be quite challenging. The way that some people have implemented this with big benefit is those that work from home. I work from home a lot of the time, and this tool is the last thing I will do before I turn off my tech for the evening. And
Okay.
what that does is provide a bridge between our working day and then our evening mode. So it's a really nice transition to just brain dump. If you've had a really tough day, just to rant about it and get it out onto
Yeah.
paper. But to note the learnings and note the progress. It takes you can write as much or as little as you want, but it's a great way of, very therapeutically processing the day you've had, which then enables you to transition and maybe walk through the front door back into home to your family in maybe a more present mode than you otherwise would. So it can be helpful as a transition to support switching off from your work mode, but also to help us become more present with our key relationships outside of work. Someone shared that they use it before they pick the kids up from school, so just sat in the car waiting for them to come out.
Kind of
They
sort of mode change switch, isn't it? In
Yeah,
the
yeah.
in the head.
In a nutshell, that's kind of that 5, we call it the 5 to thrive. It's the mental fitness workout, very tangible, bite-sized tools that we can implement into our day that proactively support us, just as those. I like what you said about providing the pauses, providing the reset, and that the reflection that maybe we don't otherwise do because we're so busy.
But we do live in a kind of world that almost expects instant gratification. Now, a lot of those things that you said sound quite simple and quick to implement. But how long do you need to try them to get any? I know this is going to be as long as a bit of string, but how long do you need to try them to get some impact and effect from them. Let's stop people trying and giving up too quickly.
And it's becoming more and more tricky, isn't it? Because our world is becoming more and more instant. You think, we can order, we're not having to wait for things anymore. We can order, Just Eat, and we can get down the road in Tring, we'll just get a delivery within 10 minutes, won't we? Or if we see someone walking down the road with some shoes we like, we can order them for same day or next day delivery. So the challenge of that instant gratification is becoming more and more prevalent, but it's also one of the skills that many thought leaders now agree is most critical for success, whatever that is: the ability to delay a small win, knowing that if we're doing so, there's a greater reward down the line, which I know we kind of touched on already. But to answer your question, how long does it take? I don't know whether I kind of give a specific kind of time frame to it, but it's, again, can we connect to the reward maybe so that we are knowing what we are working towards. And the tools that I've mentioned, they give a small, you will experience a benefit in the moment from using them, but it's the greater benefit that is felt through the consistency and the repetition. And to compare it to, again, physical health, it's like, unfortunately, I wish this was the case, but you don't go into the gym, do a few exercises and walk out with the six pack. If the six pack is what we want, we know the consistency is critical to getting there. So whatever it is that our six pack is in our mental fitness productivity area of our life, it's having that in mind when we're keeping coming back to using these tools day to day, week to week.
Is there a benefit of involving other people in them? So, having a buddy as a teammate, or raising it with your boss, or
Definitely. I think I come back to this phrase, which I think it sounds harsher than maybe it is in reality, but it's a lot easier to let yourself down than to let someone else down. And
yeah,
I experienced this as like a very personal example. I this year have been running a lot more than I ever have, and I do the park run with a friend every Saturday. Now, if my friend wasn't there, would I be as likely to consistently turn up to do it? I don't know. But knowing that you are turning up and meeting them, it provides that extra layer of accountability. So if you can bring accountability in with another person, having someone that maybe you're checking in with, whether that's your line manager, a colleague, a mentor outside of your working life, I think it's very, very beneficial. And certainly we've seen that with providing ongoing support to implement mental fitness and productivity based tools. For example, that plan, do, review, providing that open space for people every week, 8:30 till 9, people have got the accountability of the call in their diary, knowing they're joining a community of other people, which increases the likelihood of them turning up
absolutely.
to do
Yeah,
it.
good,
So
good, good,
yeah,
good tip.
yeah,
Are you ready for a contentious area question?
go ahead.
I would like to really get your opinion on resilience, because it's a massively kind of misunderstood, abused word sometimes in this area of kind of mental health, i.e., that you know, on one bad extreme, just to paint the picture, then you could be quite harsh as a boss, expecting that you're building up somebody's resilience. Um, and that's not my personal perspective, but that's an extreme that I'm sure many people face. Some bosses might do it without realizing. So how do you approach the whole subject of resilience? What does it mean?
So I suppose I'd be interested to hear, like, what are the negative experiences that you have, like, maybe experienced with resilience, the resilience word being used
I
uh,
think it. Yeah, I
in a
mean, it's more an example of you know of kind of a boss potentially piling pressure on. Could be workload, could be time to deliver, um, and an expectation that individual team member just needs to be more resilient.
right. Okay.
So quite harsh if you broke broke it down,
Hmm.
but almost hidden behind a come on, you need to grow your resilience.
Mm. Without any tangible tools to actually do so.
Yeah. Potentially.
Yeah, I think maybe that's where the gap is being told to be more resilient doesn't help, because
Absolutely. Yeah.
there's no, okay, well, how do you expect me to do that? What or how can I help myself to do that, taking, responsibility of my own development. But I suppose the situation you've described there is, it seems like a workload um, issue, and actually writing something off to just, you know, you need to be more resilient, perhaps lacks kind of that empathy and understanding of that individual's own pressures in terms of the different workload and the allocation of their time. So that situation seems a more of a kind of an understanding of what that particular person is faced with, whether that's time allocation but also different pressures. So can you get to almost like walk in their shoes to understand their operating reality, and shifting it, instead of, be more resilient. Okay, well, what can we do here to support you to be working, in a more productive way? What is it that drives success for you in your role? Can we allocate your time better to those? And being very tactical about actually what you don't do as much as you do. So again, I understand what you're saying around the, resilience. Maybe it can be, the word can be used unhelpfully. And I think that's where it's the difference between writing it off, you just need to be more resilient, actually know what can we do here? Let's look at the whole individual situation, walking in their shoes, what are they experiencing? And actually the resilience is our ability to be able to cope and bounce back from inevitable challenges and setbacks that we might experience. Does that somewhat answer
It
your
does,
question?
yeah. It was a deliberately extreme question. Most of the people I know and work with are nothing like that. But actually, just hearing you describe it in terms of it's the ability to cope and bounce back, then starts to conjure up. Because sometimes not that level of extreme that I've just given, but leaders can do things without realizing the impact on other people,
Mhm.
not necessarily to that extreme. Um, but automatically they can start to change their level to say, well, okay, what do you need in order to be able to cope?
Mm,
Because who knows what, unless you have that conversation, you've got no idea what the answer. It could be that they need training because they don't know how to do it quickly. It could be that something is going on with their life and they just need to have the day off. And the boss has got you've got no idea unless you dig a bit deeper into the things that they need in order to be able to cope.
and that's it. That resilience is a muscle, and we think, well, no matter our start point, it's something that we can develop and grow if we're provided, well, if we can find ourselves or be provided some really helpful resources. I think what you've just described there, that critical piece that maybe sometimes is missing, is that empathy piece around asking really great questions with the view to understand, and not necessarily agreeing, but just, can you understand their worldview and their operating reality to best provide some tailored next steps.
Yeah, and sometimes that doesn't need to be much more than a "How are you feeling?" question.
Yeah,
Can,
reaching out and, yeah, asking questions.
can make. So, is there anything else from a, because you're all for proactivity in doing this. So, in
Yeah.
terms of if we're going to build our uh, our resistance or our ability to change, um, what's what else would you suggest as your kind of top top tips in terms of building that resilience, getting proactive on it?
I think it's starting small, and we've talked about a lot of different practical, tangible tools to do that with the mental fitness workout, that plan, do, review. But it's, what does that tangibly look like week on week? Probably not taking them all up overnight, but instead being very tactical about maybe building one of those tools in to your next couple of weeks, finding how that best fits and can suit you, and then building up the repertoire of these evidence-based tools that you're using, so that we're setting ourselves up for the best chance of creating these helpful habits that sustain the long-term meaningful change.
does that happen a lot? People come and think, well, I'll try it all.
Well, I think the best example of that kind of thing is the approach to New Year's resolutions. You think where we have, these big
Yeah,
overnight changes that we think are going to made, but I don't know what the statistic is around how many New Year's resolutions actually are no longer happening by the end of January. We can often go too much too soon. And in doing so, we're almost setting ourselves up for failure by putting too much pressure and high expectation on us to make all these changes overnight. But actually, can we be really realistic about what we can tangibly achieve, and create ourselves even just a 1% for the next 2 weeks. I'm going to implement a breath work exercise in between my first and second call of the day. Let's then reassess and think, how's that helping me after the past couple of weeks? How can I increase that by 1%, and build it up very gradually and very realistically over time.
excellent. So small changes consistently delivered for your own success.
Yeah,
Perfect. Thank you.
yeah, summed it up perfectly for me.
But before you go, I ask everyone this: have you got a book recommendation for people?
Yes, and actually it ties into exactly what we were just talking about. It's called Chop Wood, Carry Water, and it's quite a short book, and it's a kind of anecdotal, and it looks at the power of these small marginal gains that we can make. So focusing, on the process and our efforts over time that lead us to these, these bigger goals, the bigger objectives we're working towards. So focusing on the process and the small incremental changes we can make over time that combine over the months to have the big impact. So chop wood, carry water.
Perfect. Thank you very much indeed, and indeed, thank you very much for sharing all your thoughts. There's lots of practical tips that people can start taking away, and well, picking the one they want to do, picking the action
Yeah,
they want to take.
no, good to hear.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Elise.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.